Tyndall House Publishers is, as you know, a for-profit Bible publishing company that gives basically all of its profits to charity. And they object to providing drugs that can cause very early abortions. The government admits that many of these drugs actually are designed to prevent the implantation of a newly created embryo. They just don't think that's an abortion, and they don't care anyway. They think it's mandated health care, and they're going to impose it on people. We represent Biola University, Geneva College, Louisiana College, and the Grace Colleges, all in lawsuits against this mandate. And we represent several Catholic entities as well, because the government is basically saying, we have declared business, health care, in other cases education, we have declared these areas of life to be secular, and they say this in the brief, secular is an antonym of religious, and therefore there is no religion in any of these areas. There's no religious freedom because of our thesaurus that we use here at the Health and Human Services.
Well, and then I want to come back to some of the specifics on the cases, because it's a fascinating thing, and I think it'll be very instructive. And I know one of the things I hope is that we'll find more litigants in this certain group. But Craig, just speaking to the media group, so Matt's outlined and Jennifer's outlined two groups then that as media leaders we should be concerned about. First of all, our own organizations. We don't qualify as nonprofits, as religious nonprofits, for this very, very narrow exemption for religious conscience. And then second, especially for those who do any sort of broadcast or resourcing, the people that are getting in their car, turning on the radio station in the morning, many of them are going to their jobs, they're going to their businesses. And the government has actually said that if you run a business, in this case, you don't get religious liberty. By choosing to go the business route, you've chosen to forfeit religious liberty. Is it as serious as all this?
Yeah, it really is. And I think one of the things we can do is to educate our listeners, our constituents, our partners, the public, and the people within our sphere of influence on the history behind this phenomenon, because the phenomenon really is an increasing federalization of culture and a privatization of religious liberty.
Say that again, and that was huge. That was very important.
Federalization, which means the federal government is now starting to replace spheres where private, nonprofit, and for-profit companies and ventures would be responsible socially and morally for certain conditions. Now the federal government says we're going to be the nanny state. So a federalization of culture, meaning a larger role of the federal government, and privatization of religious liberty. And I'll give you an example of how that's worked in this HHS mandate. When Roe versus Wade came down, I was in law school, and even the secular law professors were astounded at the breathtaking scope and implications. Absolutely. Because the average person didn't know health insurance, tort law, family law, it would all be affected by this one thread being pulled out of the tapestry. So the argument by the other people was, well, we're pro-choice, so it's really about our private choice. You've got all these rights to speak out. You can come to abortion clinics and speak out and come to sidewalks. We just want this one little right to choose. And then it morphed from that to, well, you really can't go to all the sidewalks. You really can't use all your free speech, because then it irritates the people going to the abortion clinics. I remember representing a poor gal, first time out, sidewalk counselor, little timid gal in Iowa. I was asked to fly over and handle her criminal case. She shows up and she hands a brochure to someone who's a plant, who has a bag, and she's acting as if she's going to get an abortion, but she's actually an abortion clinic worker, hoping somebody will touch her. And she touched this woman with the brochure and said, please read about where your baby is right now and the life that's in you. She touched her with the brochure. The woman turned around and said, you're going to be in trouble. Called the district attorney. She was prosecuted for assault because she touched the woman with the brochure. So then suddenly sidewalks and public spaces. And then we moved to funding. Now, the Hyde Amendment for many years said, and it was supported in Congress, and the American public supported it, Americans, you will never be forced to have to collaborate with or pay for abortions. It's always a private choice. But now suddenly we've even morphed from that to, well, some of you are going to have to pay, but we're going to reserve religious liberty. Well, where is the religious liberty? Well, houses of worship, exactly as Matt said. And how are you defining houses of worship? It's a little bit like the old Soviet idea in the Cold War where they said, yes, we have religious liberty. It has to be done in your house with the shutters closed, and you can't teach it to your children, and you cannot speak it in public. But you have religious liberty in your mind. That's where it's allowed. So that's, I think, the trend that we're heading on.
John, I know we're going to shift gears to marriage, but as we zoom out of this one, I want to make sure that we back up and take perspective of a whole sweep of this issue on the HHS mandate. As we did discuss the details, we get in the weeds about exemptions, we get in the weeds about the mandate, but it is important to realize and to explain to those audiences we have access to, the fundamental problem here is the underlying law, is Obamacare. It is the fact that we have handed over to government in the Obamacare law the power to define benefits and to mandate their coverage. And if we do, it is not just exemptions from this mandate that we must fight for. It's not just the repeal of this mandate. It's the repeal of that law that we must stand for. Otherwise, this will only be the first of many, many episodes that we will be engulfed in for decades, fighting for our freedom to maintain our beliefs within the provision of health care.
And, and this is something that would have been so close to Chuck Colson's heart. He was a deep believer in the idea of sphere sovereignty, that certain parts of culture have certain authority over certain spheres. It's also a Catholic idea of subsidiarity. And this is really important because, de Tocqueville said that one of the things that made America great is that between big government and the individual, you had multitudes of intermediate institutions that helped the individual govern themselves so the government didn't need to get bigger and bigger.